Welcome to another episode of Dragons Are Real, and this episode is going to be a call-in episode. So, without further ado, let's go on to the first call-in.
Hey Pete, great job reviewing ICRPG. Jason from Nerds RPG Variety Cast here. Just wanted to share one house rule that we've used in the past. Basically, we let the player roll attacks on themselves. So armor acts like any other tribute. Say you have 3 in armor, you would add 3 to your roll against the target number to see if you were hit or not. So armor basically comes defense, like a dodge score or a parry score in that case. And then if they're hit, the DM or the player could roll the damage on themselves. But just a little bit less rolling the DM has to do. And, players like rolling, so. Anyhow, I appreciate your overview of it. And like I say, I can't recommend the system enough to other people, so we'll talk to you later.
That's Jason from the Nerd Variety RPG podcast. Thanks, Jason, for that idea. Yeah, that would work as well. And it also takes the load off the GM, so anything like that is always a plus point. I'm hoping to get a game in with Jason this weekend. He's going to be running his hack of Colonial Gothic, so look forward to that one. And hopefully he'll add that revision he's done to the rules, and we'll see how it works.
Hey Pete, it's Dave. I wanted to say thank you for doing the Ubiquity review. Certainly I've only just got around to listening to it. Fascinating. It does seem like a nice, simple, easily repurposable system. And I thought I knew a bit about it, but I didn't. It turns out I was thinking of something else. I didn't know anything about it. I do have All for One in its Savage Worlds incarnation, but certainly all those settings are the kind of weird fantasy, weird sciencey stuff that I like, so I'll definitely pick one up. It does seem odd that it doesn't have a core book. With a name like Ubiquity, you'd think that was the first thing they'd do, is put out a generic core book, but you've piqued my interest and I will definitely be pursuing it further. Cheers again, Pete.
That was Dave Aldridge from dPercentile, and as you've guessed, I did the Ubiquity review for him, so I'm glad you found that useful. And I have another call in from Dave, so let's see what else he's got to say.
Also, I just picked myself up a big pile of binary dice. They're a bit tasty, aren't they? I hadn't seen them before. I was thinking, if you're going to have a game that completely only used binary dice, obviously you'd use pools like Ubiquity for your core rolls, but if you wanted random tables, well, they'd all have to be numbered in binary, wouldn't they? That could get fun. I wonder if anybody's done that. I just listened back to that last message. I wasn't going to re-record it, but it sounded like I blow you a kiss at the end. I don't. It's probably just my phone rubbing against my hood or my hair or something like that, but I thought I'd pick up on that. Well, there you go. I know we're getting close because of Purple Worm, but perhaps not that close.
Yeah, binary dice. I've got loads of them. Love them. Nice and simple. And I've written a few little games using binary dice because I think it's much easier than counting 4, 5 and 6s on D6. And Dave, if you want to blow me a kiss at the end of a phone call, I've got no problem with that. And as Dave mentioned there, we've been involved with Purple Worm. What is Purple Worm? Well, here's an advert for it. Want to hear a podcast from 4 British blokes, and from that 4 anchorites? Then the Purple Worm podcast just might be for you. Featuring myself from the Dragons Are Real, Dave Aldridge from dPercentile, Colin Green from Spike Pit, and John Large from Red Dice Diaries. The Purple Worm podcast is 4 British blokes talking RPGs. Check it out at your local podcaster, your podcatcher. We're on Google Podcasts, we're on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can find a podcast. We'll be there somewhere, so check us out. That's Purple Worm.
Hey Pete, this is John from the Red Dice Diaries. Still listening through your back catalogue. Just got up to episode 15. Greatly enjoying listening to the episodes on my way to work. I've just got to the UK Games Expo episode, and I'm glad you had fun in the Dog Places and Demogorgons game that I ran. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great, simple system, and it sort of tweaked that whole sort of like Stranger Things vibe that seems to be so popular at the minute. Again, my apologies that I didn't recognise you from that game recently when we started doing the group cast together. What can I say, dude? I have a terrible memory for names and putting faces to names. I didn't think you looked familiar, but that's not normally any sort of estimate as to whether I actually met someone, because most people look a little bit familiar to me. But hopefully we'll catch up for some more games at the Expo in the future, dude. Take it easy.
And that was John Allen Large from Red Dice Diaries. Don't worry, John. It doesn't matter that you couldn't remember me from that. We were having a chat about systems on the Audio Dungeon Discord recently, and one of the games I mentioned was Dark Places and Demogorgons. And Colin Green said, "Oh, I've read it, but I've never played it." You guessed it. Colin was in that game with me that John ran at UK Expo, and he couldn't remember he'd played it. But Colin did have his face pulled off, though, so maybe that was traumatic and he didn't want to remember it.
Hey, Pete, Jason, Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Just want to say, excellent episode on Dr. Holmes. You're right, he made the whole thing much more palatable to the non-wargamer, and even to the wargamers that weren't part of that little circle and didn't have first-hand contact with people that knew how to play it. So, one little side note. Inadvertently, you made the comment how his father was also in the Navy. Just you may know this, but U.S. Marines kind of don't like being referred to as being in the Navy, even though the Marine Corps falls under Department of the Navy. If you're ever dealing with the U.S. Marine and you want to, and you're on good terms with them, you want to give them a hard time, call them a naval infantryman. They don't particularly like that, but that's okay. Anyhow, I'll talk to you later. Take it easy. I wonder if you're Royal Marines are that way, or if the Royal Marines are their own separate branch from the Navy.
Thank you. That was Jason again. Yeah, so one of the reasons I picked Mr. Holmes was that being a wargamer myself, I knew where he was coming from, and I think he did a grand job of explaining that. Marines, yes, our Royal Marines, they come into the Navy too. A couple of my mates were in them. Not so sure over here, though, if they're offended about being called Navy, but I'll have to ask them next time I see them. So that's it for this episode. Just a short episode of some quick call-ins that I'm trying to catch up on. Don't want to miss any of them out. We're recording another 3 episodes of Purple Worm this weekend. So what I'm going to try and do is maybe tie some of my podcasts into some of the subjects we've got there, and maybe do some reviews, full reviews of the games that we talk about. And we're going to try and make the podcast a bit more British-centric. The first 3 episodes were just a loosener to get us chatting and get us up and running. We're hoping that to be a bit more focused on future episodes. So make sure you check that out and keep listening here as well. You have been listening to the Dragons Are Real podcast. My name is Pete Jones. You can find more information at my website at petejones.neocities.org or at my blog at dragonsarealpodcast.tumblr.com. The opening music was Fireflies and Stardust by Kevin MacLeod. The closing music, also by Kevin MacLeod, was Fretless